Welcome to my channel, my friends and viewers. Today will be the final chapter of our journey through 80 years of Australian leadership vlog series uh, that has been shaped not just by power but by public verdict. In part one, we saw Australia rebuild from war and embrace mass migration. In part two, we watched as reforming leaders opened the economy to the world, and in doing so, they reshaped the nation's values and expectations. Now we arrive at the most complex chapter, the modern era. It begins with John Howard, whose long tenure reasserted conservative values in the wake of economic upheaval and later global terrorism. But it's also the start of an era where leadership becomes increasingly fragile, media cycles unforgiving, and public opinion more polarized. We moved through the Rudd Rudd years, marked by ambition, instability, and internal division, a reminder that popularity without party unity can be a short lived mandate. Then, into a series of short lived prime ministers, Abbott, Turnbull, and Morrison, each grappling with cultural division, climate pressure, and the challenge of governing an electorate pulled in multiple directions. And now Anthony Albanese lead in the time when Australians are demanding not just vision, but delivery in housing, healthcare, the environment, and most importantly, the cost of living. This is an era defined not just by policies, but by performances, trust, and narratives. So, as we explore this final stretch, we ask what defines successful leadership in 21st century? And can a prime minister still unite a nation across its divides? Let's find out and begin our journey for this final part of the vlog series. John Howard, the first of these modern era prime minister, 1996 to 2007, belonged to Liberal Party. Major reforms included economic legacy, gun law reforms, 1996. He introduced national firearm agreement after Port Arthur massacre, banned semi-automatic weapons, nationwide buyback. Second, strong economic growth oversaw uninterrupted growth, budget surpluses, and record low unemployment. Treasury reported 2007. GST introduction in 2000 introduced goods and services tax, restructuring the tax system despite early opposition. Workplace reforms, he introduced work choices, promoting flexibility and employer discretion in industrial relations. Privatization and free trade continued, selling Telstra, signed US Australia Free Trade Agreement in 2004. This final chapter is beginning with John Howard, one of the longest serving and most consequential prime ministers in Australia's modern history. His leadership spans over 96 to 2007 reshaped the national conversation on safety, economics, and the role of government during his 11 years tenure. Perhaps the most defining moment came early in his tenure. The Port Arthur massacre in 1996 shocked the nation. In response, Howard introduced the National Firearm Agreement, banning semi automatic weapons and initiating a nationwide carbon ban. It was a politically risky move, but it set a global standards for gun reforms and was overwhelmingly supported by Australian public. Economically, Howard oversaw a period of record growth, nearly uninterrupted for over a decade. By 2007, Australia had budget surpluses, low inflation, and the lowest unemployment rate in 33 years. Source Treasury 2007. But reform came with contention too. The introduction of the GST in 2000 marked a major overhaul of the tax system. Though initially very unpopular and politically costly, it eventually became a stable revenue source. Howard, who championed work choices aimed at increasing flexibility in industrial relations, but critics argued it weakened worker protections and increased casualization, a debate that cost the coalition politically. His government continued the privatization of Telstra and moved towards deeper trade liberalization, notably through the US Australia Free Trade Agreement in 2004, signaling Australia's economic alignment with the global West. Howard's legacy is complex, admired for stability and decisiveness, yet divisive on industrial policy and foreign alignment. As we reflect on his era, it's worth remembering this quote from American historian Henry Adams: "A teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his influence stops." Same goes in politics. We see same effect. A prime minister's decision can echo across generations. Moving to his work choices, backlash. Controversies, in other words, seen as undermining worker protection, led to union led Your Right at Work campaign. Tampa Affairs and Border Control refused docking of MV Tamba. Tampa 2001 sparked a Pacific solution and offshore detention. Involvement in Iraq War sent troops to Iraq in 2003 without United Nations authorization, therefore faced major protests. Neglect of climate change, refused to ratify Kyoto Protocol, viewed as a climate action laggard. Indigenous affairs, he refused to offer a formal apology to the stolen generation. Though praised for leadership during 9/11 and Bali bombing, his security stance became increasingly harsh. His immigration policies laid foundation for ongoing asylum controversies. His legacy and impact, longest serving prime minister since Menzies, 11 years, paved way for modern conservative populism in Australian politics. Credited for economic resilience, especially in early 2000s. His defeat in 2007 was also historic. He lost both his seat and the governments. Howard reshaped Australian identity debates, more nationalists and less multicultural than Fraser. Seen by supporters as Australia's father of modern prosperity, by critics as a regressor on social justice. Next came the iconic Kevin Rudd. Why I say iconic is because of his special character, and therefore I would speak a little more about him. He came in 2007, stayed till 2010. Then he was taken over by Julia Gillard, his own party member. And then he came back to take from Julia Gillard back in 2013 for a short while. Uh, so his key achievements and global leadership includes apology to stolen generation, which was a very good step, though late, but it did came during his tenure. Delivered historic national apology ending years of government refusal. Response to global financial crisis was exceptional. He deployed stimulus package of $52 billion to avoid recession. It was praised by IMF the World, and the World Bank. Education revolution, he promoted digital learning, computers in classroom, and national curriculum development. Climate leadership, he signed Kyoto Protocol, which his predecessor refused to do. In 2007, Australia formally joined international climate efforts. Asia Pacific diplomacy, he advocated for Asia Pacific community model and strong China engagement. Now, let me narrate about him a little more from my own perspective. Known for policy depth and diplomacy, he was pretty fluent in Mandarin. His global financial crisis response helped Australia avoid recessions, unlike the United States and United Kingdom. GFC, the global financial crisis 2007 to 2009, is considered as the worst worldwide economic downturn since the Great Depression. It was sparked by the collapse of major US financial institutions due to subprime mortgage defaults, triggering banking failures, market crashes, and recession across many developed nations. Australia avoided a technical recession during this crisis, and Kevin Rudd's early stimulus package and interventionist economic stance are widely credited for that. Kevin Rudd entered office in 2007 with enormous public support and a promise to restore both accountability and compassion to national leadership. A former diplomat and public servant, Rudd was known for his policy depth, technocratic style, and intellectual fluency, including his command on Mandarin, which reflected both his global outlook and his strategic vision of Australia's engagement with Asia. This strategy was not without controversy, such as the bold stimulus package worth 52 billion including cash payments to households, school infrastructures upgrade and home insulation program. Australia avoided recession, maintained consumer confidence and became a global case study in crisis management. Having said that, it must be added that the last two components, the school infrastructure upgrades and home insulation program implementation, were indeed marred by mismanagement, exploitation, and tragic consequences. Let me share briefly the impact of the three components of the $52 billion package and how did it fare in the eyes of the public. Cash payments to household delivered quickly via tax bonuses up to 900 per person boosted consumer spending and confidence, widely seen as effective and non-controversial. Building the education revolution BER, he set aside 16.2 billion for building for upgrading schools, halls, libraries and classrooms aimed at creating jobs and support local constructions. However, it came with a lot of problems. Accusation of inflated costs, lack of oversight, and one size fit all projects. Some schools reported receiving infrastructure they didn't need or even requested for. Allegations surfaced of contractors profiting excessively, exploiting rushed timelines. The other one, controversial, similar to the second one, was the home insulation scheme, Pink Badge program. Offered free ceiling insulation to households up to 1600 value, aimed to support green jobs and lower energy cost. However, lot of issues. And we saw four young workers died, largely due to lack of training, safety standards, and rushed rollouts. Over 200 house fires were also linked to poorly installed insulations. Widespread fraud, with some companies submitting false claims for uninstalled work or low grade material, resulted in a royal commission in 2014 under the Abbott government. I personally will not accuse him for coming with the response to GFC with stimulus package. However, his lack of following up, and more seriously, the executive wings that implemented the scheme did it in a manner that resulted in fraud, cheating, and tragedies, including deaths of untrained and unskilled workers employed by these fraud contractors on cheap wages and get away with billions of public money meant for the Australian welfare. Rudd's leadership nevertheless won international praise during the GFC, especially for treating economic management as a matter of national solidarity, not just budget math. Rudd's strength and detail, focus, and centralized control, though, also became point of friction within his party. As we will see, his popularity with the public couldn't shield him from internal dissent. Political style and controversies, over centralized decision making, criticized for control freak leadership, sidelining cabinet processes. That is an insider labor report. ETS emission trading scheme backflipped. Postponed carbon pollution reduction scheme, loss of credibility among climate activists. Pink Bed program, the part of 52 billion package. Energy efficiency rolled out led to death of four installers due to poor regulation. Health and hospital plan delay promised reforms to public hospital funding, but implementation stalled. Kevin Rudd continues how his legacy and how did he return for a short while. Dumped by party in 2010 amid popularity decline, replaced by Julia Gillard. Brief return in 2013, but lost election to Tony Abbott. His apology to Indigenous Australians and GFC response remains his most celebrated legacy. Kevin Rudd's legacy is shaped by brilliance in crisis, but instability in leadership style. Seen as a symbol of policy ambition, but political dysfunction. Julia Gillard, 2010 to 2013, also ALP. First woman prime minister. Social and educational reform highlights. My School website. She introduced school performance transparencies for parents and educators. Gonski education reform. She initiated need based school funding, increasing equity in public education. National Disability Insurance Scheme, NDIS. She laid groundwork for universal disability support, a major structural reform. Paid parental leave, first national scheme introduced under her leadership. Royal Commission into Child Sexual Abuse, launched in 2013. Landmark inquiry praised across sector. Julia Gillard's reform reshaped education and welfare systems permanently. NDIS and Gonski still influence Australian policy debates today. Political struggles and gender critique. Critique, leadership tensions came to power after ousting Rudd faced persistent internal leadership challenges. Carbon tax controversy, another challenged critique. She introduced carbon pricing despite pre-election promise not to do so, leading to trust issue with the public. Media hostility, faced sexiest commentary and relentless tabloid criticism. Hung parliament between 2010 and 13 required crossbench negotiation. She faced legislative gridlocks at times. Despite hostile media, Gillard passed over 500 pieces of legislations in a hung parliament, high effectiveness. Her famous misogyny speech, 2012, became globally viral and iconic in feminist politics. Her legacy and international standing, being the first prime minister, she broke gender barrier in federal leadership in Australia. Major contributor to NDIS Konski Royal Commission, seen as a policy achiever, ousted by Rudd in 2013 before election. Gillard is increasingly recognized as one of Australia's most effective policy prime ministers, especially in hindsight. Her tenure is a case study in gender, media bias, and inner party instability. Next, Tony Abbott, 2013 to 2015, ALP. Key policies and decisions: abolition of carbon pricing, repealed Gillard's carbon tax in 2014, a key election promise, so stood by his word. Border security measures: he launched Operation Sovereign Borders, strict offshore processing, and turnbacks. Paid parental leave proposal: proposed a generous scheme but abandoned due to internal party resistance. Free trade agreement: he finalized FTAs with China, Japan, and South Korea, boosting agricultural and resource exports. Defense spending increase, reinvested in military procurements and alliances, especially with United States. Abbott's government focused on reversing labor era reforms, appealing to conservative and rural voters. His aggressive asylum policy won support but drew international human rights criticism. His criticism and controversies: broken promises. He promised no cut to health, education, or ABC, but all faced budget reductions. That's ABC Fact Check 2014. Captain's Call: made key decisions unilaterally. Prince Philip knighthood, for example, undermining party confidence. Climate change stars. Stars described climate science as an absolute crap. Cut renewable energy funding. In the health and budget cuts 2014, budget proposed 7 GP co-payment, $7 GP co-payment, widespread backlash from health sector and public. Low approval rating, consistently poor polling, faced internal party discontent. Despite policy wins on immigration and trade, Abbott alienated many with an ideological and competitive style. His hardline approach to public spending clashed with social expectations. His legacy and fall. Prime Minister for just 2 years, removed by party room ballot in 2015. He will be remembered for austerity push and political rigidity. Stopping the boat's immigration policy left unresolved tension in climate and gender policy areas. Abbott's rise and fall show how quickly ideological leadership can lose public and party favors without flexibility or broad consensus building. Next, Malcolm Turnbull, 2015 to 2018, Liberal Party. Innovation, economy, and infrastructure. His first major achievement: National Innovation and Science Agenda introduced in 2015, promoted STEM investments, digital transformation, and tech startups. Same sex marriage legislation: he held postal survey in 2017, majority yes voted led to legislative change. Snow Hydro 2 launched major renewable infrastructures, initiated pumped hydro. Company tax cuts: he reduced taxes for small and medium sized businesses. Gonski 2 adjusted school funding formula for greater equity and sustainability. Turnbull positioned himself as a progressive within a conservative party, balancing business support with some social reforms. His focus on tech and innovation was the most forward looking agenda since Hawke and Keating. Party divisions and climate paralysis. Climate policy gridlock. He introduced National Energy Guarantee (NEG), shelved due to internal revolt. Leadership turmoil, constant pressure from a right wing faction, for example, from Abbott and Dutton. Dual citizenship crisis, several MPs got disqualified under Section 44, D is destabilized parliament. Same sex marriage delay, criticized for not legislating directly, opting for non binding plebiscite instead. Turnbull was hamstrung by ideological divides within his party, particularly over climate and energy. He lost control of the narrative despite strong public popularity on some issues. Malcolm Turnbull, his legacy, how he will be remembered, he was disposed by his own party in 2018 despite some decent public approval. Remembered, he will be remembered for marriage equality legislation, advocacy for a knowledge economy, and attempts at climate moderation within a hostile caucus. Scott Morrison, next, between 2018 and 2022, also from the Liberal Party. Crisis management and major policies was his hallmark. COVID 19 pandemic response led JobKeeper wage subsidy $89 billion program, and health restrictions helped avoid economic collapse. AUKUS Alliance 2021 strategic defense pact with United Kingdom and United States, nuclear submarine deal announced. Religious discrimination bill, he introduced controversial bill to protect religious expressions, abandoned amid backlash. Vaccination rollout, secured vaccine supplies, but rollout was initially delayed and disorganized. Support for fossil fuels, promoted gas led recovery, and expanded coal production amid global climate pressure. Morrison's pandemic economic management was widely praised earlier, but vaccine delays eroded trust. Focused heavily on national security and border protection, continuing Howard Abbott traditions. Controversies and criticism. I don't hold a hose, might faced backlash for Hawaii holiday during the Black Summer bushfire 2019 to 20, which I think mostly disgraced him in the public eyes. Secret ministerial appointments, appointed himself to five portfolios in secret, revealed after election loss to Governor General's record 2022. Women's Right and Culture mishandled Parliament House sexual assault scandal, Brittany Higgins case. Robodebt scheme fallout, although initiated earlier, continued under Morrison's watch, targeting welfare recipients unlawfully. Morrison's perceived lack of empathy and over centralization of power damaged his leadership image. Critics described him as too secretive, reactive, and self promotional. Legacy and 2022 election defeat. Defeated by Albanese in May 2022, he will be remembered for pandemic support success early, but scandals and secrecy damaged trust. Failure to lead on climate change, post Prime Minister conduct under scrutiny via Robodebt Royal Commission and ministerial secrecy reports. Morrison's leadership arc shows the fragility of approval during crisis, if not backed by integrity and transparency. His handling of gender integrity and climate issues may shape long term reputational damage to the coalition brand. Now, the present, Anthony Albanese, 22 to present time and past going on to the near future as well. Key reforms and promised delivered. He promised about aged care reforms. He mandated 24/7 registered nurses in aged care homes, funded better wages for workers. In industrial relation change, he passed Secure Jobs, Better Pay Act 2022, strengthened bargaining rights, and closed gender pay gaps. Uluru Statement Commitment, he supported a voice to Parliament Referendum 2023, a major indigenous constitutional proposal. International re engagement, he restored ties with Pacific neighbors and China post Morrison cooling. National Reconstruction Fund, he directed $15 billion investment in clean energy, tech, and manufacturing. Albanese has focused on pragmatic social reforms while keeping fiscal stability. His style contrasts sharply with Morrison, collaborative, quieter, and more inclusive. His challenges and criticism: voice referendum defeat in 2023. Despite national campaign, voice to parliament was rejected, sparkling debate over strategy and division. Housing affordability crisis. He is criticized for slow action on housing availability and rent controls. Energy price pressure, cost of living remained high despite subsidies, energy transitions uneven, migration and skills policy surge in international migration placed pressure on housing, health, and transport sectors. Trade off on climate, he approved gas and coal projects alongside renewables, mixed climate creditability. Albanese faced economic pressure from global inflation and housing demand. The voice defeat was major symbolic loss, but he's continued to push social unity and long term investment. As far as housing availability and rent control is concerned, there is another vlog by myself. If viewers would like to see it, they will find out some other key factors those have created housing availability and rental control problems. Moving on, his ongoing legacy as of 2025, and let's see, hopefully another 3 years to go. Restoration of institutional trust. He established National Anti-Corruption Commission, which is a good step. Focus on women's safety and equality. He boosted funding for domestic violence services and gender equity plans. Education and skills, TAFE and university fee caps, reskilling programs, and push for future made in Australia agenda. Quiet but stable governance, he restored parliamentary decorum, often praised for non divisive rhetoric. Albanese's legacy is still forming, but early assessments highlight his institution building social equity agenda and moderate economic stewardship. He may be remembered as a post crisis stabilizer following 3 decades of leadership. John. Now, summary of the 80 years of Australian leadership. Key shifts across 1945 to 2025. What are the major themes I have analyzed and like to present to you? Shift from imperial to independent identity. Menzies aligned with Britain by Keating and Rudd. Australia pursued an Asia Pacific focus. Economic evolution, post war Keynesianism, Hawke's, Keating's neoliberalism, and Harvard's conservatism. modern hybrid models. Social progress, but with setbacks, Wil- Wiltham's education and health reforms, Hawke's Medicare, Gillard's NDIS, Albanese aged care. Ongoing struggles, indigenous justice, housing affordability, gender equity. Climate policy paralysis, Gillard introduced pricing, Abbott repealed it. Morrison resisted actions, Albanese tried balance, Australia still divided on energy future. Leadership instability post 2007, six prime ministers in 15 years, fueled by party coups, media pressure, and factionalism. Rise of integrity and identity politics, from Harvard nationalism to Rudd's apology, Morrison scandals, Albanese NACC, and Voice. Australia's leadership history reflects nations' search for balance between global engagement, economic pragmatism, and social inclusions. Voters now demand not just economic competence, but transparency, compassion, and forward thinking solutions, especially on climate and cost of living. Coalition ruled for about 54 years in power. Compared to them, the Labour Party LP for about 26 years of power. That was the summary of their performances. Um, Successful leaders often align their key decisions with evolving national identity narratives. I'll keep moving. We have covered three. There are two more factors which helped in making a prime minister popular among the Australians. Ability to communicate complex policy simply. Whitlam used memorable phrases. Medibank, it's time. Howard framed GST as a tax for the future. Gillard, My School, and NDIS became household names despite complex backend policies. Tangible public benefits within short-term horizon, the fifth factor making a prime minister popular among Australians. Medicare, Hawke, and superannuation brought personal benefits clarity. People were happy. JobKeeper, Morrison, and Rudd's 900 checks were directly felt by the household. They were happy. Hex Hawk framed as affordable education access despite being debt based. Framing and language are popular. Popular reforms often have a simple branding and messaging. Australians support policies they can see and touch or feel in the short term, not just those promised for the future. Now, the five common factors making Prime Minister unpopular among Australians: perceived dishonesty or broken promises. Tony Abbott, 2014, broke promises on health, education, and ABC funding, triggering mass disapproval. Julia Gillard promised no carbon tax, followed by implementation under minority governments, severely damaged public trust. Scott Morrison's secret ministerial portfolio scandal fed into growing distrust. Poor handling of crisis, the second factor, making Prime Minister unpopular among Australians. Poor handling of crisis or lack of empathy. Scott Morrison's Hawaii holiday during the Black Summer bushfire and his "I don't hold a hose, mate" comment became symbol of disconnection. Fraser's inaction during rising unemployment and wage suppression in late 70s made him seem distant from struggling Australians. So, point one, let me rephrase: Australians react strongly to leaders who are seen as breaking trust, especially regarding core election commitments. Second, failure to act swiftly or demonstrate human understanding in times of crisis often led to a collapse in public approval. The next three factors making Prime Minister unpopular: overreach or arrogant leadership style. Kevin Rudd was criticized for control freak tendencies, centralized cabinet, and micromanagement. Abbott's captain calls, for example, Prince Philip knighthood, bypassed his cabinet and embarrassed his party. Morrison's secret accumulation of portfolios reflected excessive consolidation of power. Number four, factor failure to explain or defend complex reforms. Gillard's carbon pricing was poorly explained to voters and labeled a tax, fueled media and opposition backlash. Work choice by Harvard was seen as a vague threat to workers' right, helped cost him 2000 election. Neglect the final of key issues affecting daily life. Albanese faced criticism over housing affordability and rent stress despite broader reform efforts. Fraser was blamed for not tackling inflation and unemployment in time. Turnbull lost support partly due to climate policy paralysis despite public desire for action. Let me recapture or summarize these three. When Prime Minister appeared overly controlling or dismissive, they often lose both public goodwill and internal party support. Australians dislike authoritarians or top down governing styles, even when policies themselves might be acceptable. The fourth, failure to explain or defend complex, even when well-designed policies floundered, well-designed policies floundered when leaders failed to communicate their values or mechanism clearly. Lesson: poor messaging or technical jargons alienate voters. Australians support reforms they can understand and discuss. Finally, failing to address or prioritize urgent economic and social issues damage leaders' approval, even if their overall policy record was solid. Ignoring bread and butter issues like housing, energy, health, or wages often outweighs achievements in less immediate areas. Coming to the end, let's briefly reflect back to it, from John Howard's long tenure to Julia Gillard's historic leadership, and from pandemic stimulus to rising cost of living pressures. Australia's recent leaders have navigated a complex, divided, and often demanding landscape. Across these 80 years, one thing becomes clear: popularity is fleeting, but impact is lasting. The most respected leaders weren't perfect, but they listened, learned, and left behind a legacy Australians could build on. As citizen, we must ask not just who governs, but how. What kind of leadership do we reward? What values should guide decision making? The answer shapes not only our future, but the story we will tell the next generation. That comes to the conclusion of the final part of my three-part vlog series. I hope you enjoyed the summary of how the prime ministers over the period of 80 years performed, what made them become popular in the eyes of Australians, and what brought their downfall. With that, I will end my this series, and I hope if you have liked, you will subscribe and like it too. and leave comments that will help me make my future vlogs better. I'll be soon coming back with another interesting topic shortly. Till then, you look after yourself, take care. It's bye bye for now.